What's going on, my friends? Albie with Albie Fitness Gaming, and you see the title of the video, you know why you're here. Green, white, death, and taxes. Dech. So, not only am I going to go over the deck here for you guys, I'm going to give you reasons on why this version is built the way that it is. Pretty much, by the time you're done watching this video, you'll be a Death and Taxes professional. Hopefully. I've been playing Death and Taxes variations from the beginning of Modern, from Legacies, and, I don't know, man, probably since like 2008, 2009-ish, around there. I don't remember. It was around the time of the printing of Thalia, so I think that was like 2009, 2010. I don't remember. But it's been a while. It's been a while. A lot of Maverick, a lot of Death and Taxes. Decade of experience, still bad at the game, but I understand the deck. I understand this deck. So today I'm going to tell you guys, we'll pretty much try to explain to you guys and show you, the deck that I've been working on, Green, White, Death, and Taxes, why to play this deck, if you want to, etc., and how Death and Taxes overall as a deck works. So, one thing you'll first, before we go into the deck, let's talk about Death and Taxes a little bit. So currently this is the #1 played version of the deck here, which is mono white. You got your usual suspects: Giver of Ruins, Leonard Arbiter, Stoneforge Mystic, Thalia, Archon, Flicker Wisp, Skyclave, Path. I mean, the deck is pretty much streamlined right now. Except for maybe the sideboards, that always depends, but pretty much the deck is streamlined, right? You have your 4 canopy lands, your 4 ghost quarters, 4 field of ruins, your plains. Some people play 11 plains, some people play the castle, but the deck for the most part is streamlined. Okay, now there are other variations. There is a green variation of the deck which plays Yorion. This is more based on a value style of the deck, right? So you're going to play things like Eternal Witness, and this is another option here to pump the team, another way to attack, but mainly it's more of a value. So you have Eternal Witness and you have the Oath of Nissa. Oath of Nissa not only gives you value when it comes into play, but it also helps you filter through your deck, because now you're playing 20 more cards than usual, so it's going to be less likely to see these cards. Therefore, being able to filter through your deck with this card is actually very, very good. This deck went 8-0. 8-0, folks. I play tested this deck for a little bit. I only played maybe 3 or 4 games. It felt like a lot. It felt like it was too much for me to handle. I think it's one of those decks that is very rewarding if you play over and over and over and you understand all the ins and out. Especially when you throw in 20 cards, like the math to the cards that you want, the strategy I don't know, to me it was a little bit hard to come up with a strategy when you have so many cards that you can draw into, right? It's an extra 20 cards, that's a lot. Even with the help of this, I still felt that it felt a little harder to play than the mono white version. I would prefer the mono white. I think it's more consistent. Personally, that's my opinion. But again, I haven't played this deck enough to really give proper feedback. So let's talk about the mono white version, because this is what most people play. It's streamlined. It's easy to pick up, as far as you don't really need to mess with the deck too much and figure out what to play. It is what it is. This is what the deck does. You have Giver of Ruins to protect your disruptive creatures. Disruptive creatures is Leonard Arbiter. You have your Thalia, your Archon, your Flicker Wisp, and your Skyclave, right? These are disruptive creatures. Then you have your aggro, which is your Stoneforge Mystic. That with equipment is going to close out the game, along with Flicker Wisp, which can also be used as an aggressive creature to close out the game. If the deck starts to mana flood and you have your Vial out, you can start drawing extra cards with Horizon Canopy. The mono white version doesn't have much of a value engine built into this deck. It's really meant to disrupt the opponent, set the opponent back, 2 or 3 turns with Leon Arbiter, Thalia, and Archon, and then disrupt them a little even more with Skyclave and Flicker Wisp, and then protecting that with the Giver of Ruins, and then finishing them off. So there's no real way to generate value. It is what it is. So it's really easy to get put behind and not be able to come back if the opponent starts off with a good sequence that gets rid of the creatures that you're trying to play. But at the same time, this deck is really good at making comebacks. I love playing this deck. It's one of those decks, I always say, you're playing from behind the whole time, so you're always turning the corner and making comebacks. And it makes me feel good. It makes me feel like a real professional Magic player when I play this deck. So pretty self-explanatory on the deck here. Pretty straightforward when it comes to that. That's the game plan here, right? Disrupt your opponent, set them back a couple of turns. That way you're ahead, and then you win from there. And you have to protect your pieces with your Giver of Ruins. Very important card in this deck. So now that we have an understanding of the two versions of the deck, let's talk about my version. So my version is a green-white version. Now keep in mind what I mentioned. When you splash the color green, you're looking for a little bit more value. That is what green is going to give you. Now there are some cards that you have to remove when you play green. Otherwise you might as well just play mono-white. Time and time again, I see people try to play green-white, the non-Urion versions, and they have like Leon Arbiters, Giver of Ruins, and they'll add like a Rabanap Excavator, or a Tracker, or Eternal Witness, and they'll add like, or Scavenging Ooze, they'll add one or two green cards here and there, or sometimes they'll even add Noble Hierarchs. And in my opinion, and from playtesting and from playing this deck such a long time, it's not worth splashing green to play, one or two green cards that really don't make the deck better. They're not going to make the deck better. Mono white, you might as well just play mono white. Here's the thing about these decks. These decks, look at the cards, folks. Look at the cards. They're 4 out of 10 at best. They're not the most powerful cards. You don't have to worry about anything ever getting banned. I hope not. But realistically, you look at these cards, they're not very powerful. So in order to win with this deck, you have to make sure that you are taking full advantage of every card that you play. You have to be playing that card at its full potential. Okay? For example, I see people play Collected Company with Flicker Wisp. That's okay, but Flicker Wisp is at its best when you play it with Vial. Leonoran Arbiter with the splash of green. Again, that card is played best in a mono-white version when you can use Field of Ruins and Ghost Quarter. Right? Why dilute the deck? Playing green, you get Noble, you get Rabanap, which I don't have in this deck, but I mean, it's not worth diluting the deck. You might as well just stick to the game plan. Now, in my version, which picks up some of the disadvantages the mono white version has, this is what it is. Untitled Reliquary is a really huge threat. It can close out the game in 1 or 2 turns. So it can really just close out the game. And one of the things these decks struggle with is they can get ahead or they can stall the opponent, but they have trouble closing the game. If you've played this deck before, you know that is one of the issues you can run into. You can stall the opponent all you want, but you have to be able to close the game because eventually they will come back and they will annihilate you. And it's going to be not a fun time. All right, so Untitled Reliquary does that. It ends the game really quickly. It also allows you to mana ramp, fetch out your Horizon Canopies and your Ghost Quarters and things like that more consistently to use them. Now, because you don't have Leon Arbiter, you're not going to be mana screwing the opponent, but you're going to be focusing more on getting rid of their value lands or any problematic lands that they have. Another thing with Untitled Reliquary here is that you only required to have one threat to win the game, which is Knight, right? If you have him in play. So as far as mass removal, you don't have to worry too much about that. When you're playing the mono white version, you have to have, like 3 or 4 creatures in order to close out the game. Like, your creatures are not big unless you have an equipment on one of your creatures, then maybe you can close out the game in 3 or 4 turns, but that's still kind of a long time. That gives the opponent a lot of time to make a comeback. So that's why I like the Untitled Reliquary. Now, obviously, if we're playing Untitled Reliquary, Leonoran Arbiter cannot be played because we're going to be doing a lot of fetching. So because we're not playing Leonoran Arbiter, we play these one-ofs here, right? We play a Pride Mage. These are just good utility creatures. Gadog Teague, Scrib Ranger, which is just amazing with Noble Hierarchs, Neither Reliquary, and Dryad Arbor. We'll get to that. And the Singleton Scavenging Ooze. And then let's talk real quick about the lands here real quick. So the lands are pretty self-explanatory here. You have your Horizon Canopies, your Ghost Quarters, your Horizon lands, the 4 of the Ghost Quarters. So really you're losing the Field of Ruins, but that's fine. We're not playing Leon Arbiter. We have a Singleton Dryad Arbor, which we can play on turn. We'll turn with 0 counters on the Vial, right? Because it is a creature, so you can Vial in the Dryad Arbor to ramp there. You can also fetch out the Dryad Arbor. You know, if Liliana comes down, sack a creature, you can do that. A surprise blocker. With Scrib Ranger, you can use the Dryad Arbor, block with the Dryad Arbor, and then because you're allowed to return a forest, you can return the Dryad Arbor to your hand, therefore dealing no combat damage, which is really good if you're going against any opposing opponents with Batterskulls because it will prevent them from gaining life. Now, Giver of Ruins, not in the deck. We're playing Noble Hierarch instead. Giver of Ruins is really good when you are protecting specific pieces like Leon Arbiter, Thalia, Arkan. You have to protect those creatures in mono white because you have no way of making a comeback as far as value. So the way that you maintain your board presence is by protecting your creatures. In the mono green version, since we're not playing Leon Arbiter and we're not playing Flicker Wisp, we don't really need to protect our creatures, right? We're just going to be bigger. We're going to have some disruptive, but we do have Knight of the Reliquary and Tireless Tracker to basically close out the game. We can also have Scavenging Ooze depending on where we're at. And of course we have the equipment that could be equipped to any of our weenies here. So in reality, we're more focused about powering out our 3-drops, our equipment, aggressively using our Horizon Canopies to draw into cards. If we have a Tireless Tracker, we're going to generate value from there. So that's why we're playing Noble Hierarch over Giver of Ruins. It just fits better in this version of the deck. I'm not saying that Noble is better than Giver, but it's better than Giver in this deck here. So of course, so this moves us over to here. Of course, we got Path and Vial. That's normal. We have the Stoneforged Mystic with the Stoneforged package here. This is pretty much standard now, the Batterskull, the Sword, and the Skyclave Sword. Then we play the 4 Thalias. And 4 Thalias, this is going to be your disruption along with Gadog Teague, Scavenging Ooze potentially, depending on what you're playing against, and Quasali Pride Mage, but mainly is Thalia, right? So Thalia is your disruptive piece along with the Archon. So when you're playing Death and Taxes, one of the ways to get ahead of your opponent big time is to have at least 2 taxing pieces. That's why the mono white is really good at this, because it technically plays 3 creatures that can do that. Leon Arbiter, Thalia, and the Archon, right? So when you play those 3 creatures, you have a higher probability of having 2 in play. When you have 2 in play, you're setting your opponent back, anywhere from 1, 2, or 3 turns, which in Modern, a lot of the games come down to 1 or 2 turns anyway. So this jump, skyrockets your win percentage out of the roof when you have these 2 in play early on in the game. You could run into situations where it's later in the game and they kind of become irrelevant, but early on, these 2 pieces here, and the Noble Hierarch helps us really power out the Archon here, are going to be able to lock the opponent out and slow them down enough for us to get our Knight going and end the game quickly. What else do we have here? We have, of course, Skyclave Operation. We are playing a 3. Maybe we should play 4 and replace it with the Tracker. Tracker's been pretty good so far when I do draw it because it does give us a lot of value, especially with Knight of the Reliquary. But who knows, maybe we'll just go with 4 Skyclave Operation. That card is really, really good. So, I'm not 100%. Again, we're just testing this deck. So far, it's been doing pretty good. Sideboard, nothing crazy here. Almost the same as the mono white. We got the Winds of Abandonment, Aven Mind Sensor. This is for Winds of Abandonment, really good against decks that go wide. Aven Mind Sensor, just a good card against a lot of decks that use fetch land. If you have to remove some irrelevant threats here that you're not going to be able to utilize in the matchup, you can always side in Aven Mind Sensor. It's always okay at worst. Against Scathe Shift, it's really good, although they do know how to play around it. A good player does know how to play around it. We got Eidolon or Rhetoric. Really good against combo decks. We have some pieces here that also are good against combo decks, but this is just to pretty much assure that those matchups. Then here we have a singleton Knight of Autumn. That's pretty much like a catch-all, whether we need a threat, replace one of our weenies here that doesn't do too much, or if we need, against burn, you can gain life, or, destroy target artifact enchantment. Just a pretty much catch-all creature there that's pretty good. And then we have Tireless Tracker and Voice of Resurgence. These are your value cards. These are cards that are going to generate value. We typically add these cards against decks where Thalia is not good. Against like Jund matchups and other mid-range decks, Thalia is not at its best. I mean, it disrupts them a little bit, but it's really fragile, and they have a lot of removal. So we'll go ahead and pretty much, that's like a package here. These 4 cards here, 9 times out of 10, usually get rid of the Thalias here. That's what you would switch out for those matchups. And then we have our Graveyard Hate. We can't play Rest in Peace because we have Knight of the Reliquary. So we're playing Tormod's Crypt, which I think is the next best thing. And then a singleton, Emrakul. This is just for Mill. Mill does play, I was looking at their list, they normally run about 4 Surgical Extraction, so it's probably not at its best. But I just wanted to try it out and see if it's even something even worth entertaining. But who knows, maybe we'll have to maybe put another Gaddock Teeg or another Knight of Autumn or another Scavenging Ooze. I'm not sure. There's a lot of cards that can go here, so who knows. Alright, so there you have it, my friends. The green-white Death and Taxes list that I am working on currently. I've already played about 10 or 15 games. Been doing very well with it. Pretty much the same as I've been doing with the mono-white version. Make sure to hit that notification button because starting tomorrow I'll be posting some of my matchups once I get my voiceover and editing them. I'll be posting the matches daily throughout the week. That way you guys can see how the deck runs and we can talk about interaction so you can get a better feel on how the deck runs against the format. If you have any questions, comment at the bottom. I'll answer your questions. And again, guys, I appreciate you guys checking out the videos. Thank you so much. Oh yeah, and subscribe and like my video, man. Anyways, thank you again for watching and peace out.